All of our brains, they have rules for creating transformational changes. And these rules have been proven neuroscientifically in all sorts of neuroscientific tests, and unusually for many of these tests that you see being reported, these studies, they've actually been replicated, which means that the studies have been done over and over again and have got the same results. And so we now know that our brains have rules that need to be followed, because they're the brain's rules, after all, for creating transformational change. And we've known this only for the past 20 years or so. And so therapists like me, who are aware of what those rules are able, for the first time, to very deliberately go through the brain's rules, to go through that map of how to create transformational change. And by following the brain's rules, can actually ensure that transformational change happens for you. Now, when I talk about transformational change, there are two kinds of change you can make. The first is what you might call counteractive change. Now, with counteractive change, what happens is that, well, let's rewind a little bit. Let's say, for instance, something significant happens to you. It might be something that was upsetting in a significant way, or scary in a significant way. What happens is that your brain creates a little network, if you like, in layperson's terms. And within that network is that particular memory. And not just the factual memory of it, like I did this and then I did that and then I did the other, but also the kind of bodily memory of it as well, like how your body responds, like a startle response or whatever, in response to that. And all the emotional learning as well as part of that memory, because when we remember things, especially traumatic or upsetting or significant things from our past, it kind of teaches us something emotionally. It might not be a true thing that it teaches us, but we come up with we make sense of it emotionally, what happened to us. And that's what I mean by emotional learning. And all of that is stored away within this particular set, this particular neural network, if you like, this particular part of our neural network, I guess. I'm trying to explain this in a way which doesn't get too scientific and highfalutin. But if you can think of it in that way, that there's a network of stuff that contains that memory, and it's in that part of the brain's neural structure. That's where that kind of memory and emotional memory is contained. Well, with counteractive change, what we'll try to do is we'll try and create a completely different set of neural responses elsewhere. And what we're effectively trying to do there is we're trying to make sure that the new becomes stronger than the old. And so the old traumatic significant stuff is there with all of their responses. That's not being overwritten in any way. That still exists. But a new set has been created. And the hope is that, almost like two football teams playing each other, the new football team that we create, say, in therapy, will beat the old one. And that's what we mean by counteractive change, because the old stuff is still there. It hasn't been overwritten. It still exists. We're just creating something to try and outpower it in the future. And that could be really useful, but also in times of high stress, the original kind of synapses start to kick in. And that's when people experience, going back to the old patterns. Transformational change is different in terms of how it happens in the circuitry of the brain, because those that neural network that I was talking about, those synapses that contain the original traumatic memory, we never used to think that they could actually be overwritten, but it turns out, this is the stuff that we found out within the last 20 years, that it can be, and that there are particular steps to follow that the brain insists that you follow to actually open those synapses up again so you can rewrite it before it closes back down. You see, we used to think that if something really significant had happened, that the brain simply wouldn't let go of that. And, there's a good reason why it might not, or why it would be resistant to letting go of stuff that's significant, because if it was significant, it really wants to remember it. If you see a stripy cat that's really about as big as you almost, you need to remember, for instance, that that's a tiger. So you recognize that that's something that is dangerous to you. And so why would the brain want to just let you get rid of that? So it used to be thought that those sorts of significant memories where we were in danger would be kind of hard written in, and it wasn't possible to rewrite them. The brain basically files it and throws away the key. But the findings in the last 20 or so years show that that isn't the case. And while the brain is still very resistant to letting these things go, there are ways in which you can actually open it up, what I call the brain's rules for transformational change. And so with transformational change, you're not setting up a rival neural network, if you like. What you're actually doing is you're taking the original networks in the brain that are storing that memory, unlocking them and rewriting them before you lock it and put it away again. Now, when I say rewriting, the stuff that I'm talking about is the emotional learning, the kind of bodily responses and the emotional learning that we get from that. I'm not talking about the biographical stuff. So when we do this, you will still know, for instance, that such and such a thing happened. You'll still be able to tell the story of this happened and then that happened and then that happened. But what will be overwritten in transformational change are all the things that means for us emotionally. All those emotional lessons which may not have even been true, but now hold us back. It rewrites all of that stuff. It rewrites the bodily responses as well. So maybe you had a startle response and then you don't after the transformational change. It doesn't have the same impact at all. And so they're the differences really between transformational and counteractive change, even in a kind of identifiably physical sense. You're working on different parts of the brain's neural network. So counteractive change, you're creating a brand new one in order to try and overpower the original, but with transformational change, you're directly rewriting the original one. So I hope I've not lost too much of the accuracy there in trying to explain the bits of the brain in a way that's understandable. But hopefully you get my drift. One, you'll create a brand new thing to try and compete with the old one. But with transformational change, you actually overwrite the old one. So there's nothing for it to compete with anymore. And it's transformational because it loses its power over us for good. And so I'm sharing that with you because not everybody realizes the breakthroughs that have happened in neuroscience in the last 20 or so years. Even many therapists aren't aware of it. But it is now genuinely possible to create transformational change in the way that I've just described. And so it's useful, isn't it, to know that this kind of thing exists so that we're not stuck with just trying to create this counteractive change where we kind of relapse back into old patterns when things get particularly stressful. But we know that there actually is a way, a roadmap, if you like, of ensuring that we can actually overwrite that old stuff and create change which genuinely is transformational. It doesn't fall into relapse. And that thing is called memory reconsolidation. And it's one of the things that I do in my practice. It's one of the things that I follow, that roadmap of the brain's rules, because I'm one of those therapists that are aware of it, in order to make that transformational change happen. And so I just wanted you to be aware that there was actually that possibility that the transformational change, where the emotional learning that we carry, where the bodily responses that we have can actually be changed almost at source, physiologically at source, by those methods which follow the brain's own rules for transformational change. And so if this idea has been interesting to you, please feel free to spread it around and share it. You can subscribe to this podcast completely free wherever you get your podcasts, or on Spotify. And you can watch these as videos on asliceoftherapy.com, and you can work with me one-to-one. I'm Alun Parry at liverpoolpsychotherapy.co.uk. Thanks for listening. I'll be back again tomorrow.